A lot of founders think their leaders are making decisions independently because on a normal day, the business looks fine. People seem to know what they own. I mean, meetings are happening and work's moving. From the outside, it looks like the company's relying less on the founder. And then something actually breaks. That's when a client gets upset or a deadline slips. Maybe two leaders disagree on a decision or a KPI lands under target. And now, getting it wrong could get expensive. That's when everyone starts watching what happens next, because what happens next is the whole thing. In that moment, it tells you more than most founders realize, because this is where the company shows you the truth. You don't learn much from easy conditions. You learn it in the fire. When the stakes go up and something important starts to slip. That's when you find out whether your team's actually making decisions on their own or whether they've just been waiting for things to stay calm enough that it never came up. A lot of founders read that moment wrong. They think the team's not ready yet or that people need more training. They need tighter communication or closer oversight. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. I mean, when something important starts slipping, stepping in feels responsible. It feels like leadership because you're trying to protect the work, the client, and the business. So you step back in. Sometimes it's obvious, but a lot of the time it's small. Like maybe a Slack message or jumping into a thread that shouldn't need you. Sometimes it looks like rewriting work somebody else was supposed to finish and stepping into a decision that was already covered by somebody else. Or maybe it's making an exception because the moment feels way too important to let the team carry the full weight of it. And that one exception, that's what teaches your team more than any meeting ever did. The issue isn't that tension showed up. It's what the business did when it showed up. Did the standards stay intact or did authority start drifting back to the founder? That's the test, and most businesses fail it in small moments way before anyone names it. The second you step back in, people figure out pretty fast where decisions actually get made, where the real safety net is, and that ownership only holds up when nothing important is on the line. That's pressure drift. Pressure drift is what happens when things get hard and you realize the business never actually stopped running through the founder. For a while, it can look like ownership or sound like ownership, even work like ownership when nothing's being tested, but that first tense moment tells you it was only being borrowed, not transferred. It really matters because teams don't really learn from what the leaders say, they learn from what the system continually does. You can tell people they own a function and say they have authority, and you can spell out the standards. You can even define the responsibilities in a meeting. And you can build something that looks pretty solid on paper, but when the founder steps back in, the second things get hairy, everybody gets the real message. And the real message isn't what was said, it's what held up. People pick that up real fast, faster than most founders would expect. They learn more from exceptions than policies, and more from what the founder actually does than what the founder says. Once that happens a few times, the business adjusts, not consciously, but structurally. People stop carrying the full decision weight. They begin escalating earlier, asking for reassurance sooner. They start bringing problems to you half finished and start trying not to be wrong instead of fully owning what they're supposed to own. At some point, nobody is really sure who owns what anymore, and not really anyway. And from the founder side, that gets frustrating pretty fast. Now, it feels like the team keeps pulling the founder back in, no one's stepping up, and the questions keep coming back that shouldn't need the founder at all. But a lot of that behavior isn't random, it's learned. The business trained it. I mean, not on purpose, but over and over again. So every time the founder steps back in the middle of a tense moment, the company got a little more proof about how things actually work. And once the team has that proof, it's a bit hard to unlearn. That's why founder dependency gets misunderstood so often. A lot of people talk about it like it's a workload problem, like the founder just has too much going on, or that it mostly comes down to delegation or time management, down to communication or better meetings. And those things matter, but they don't get to the real issue. Founder dependency isn't just about volume, it's about gravity. It's about where things bend when strain shows up. Does the business keep moving through the structure that was supposedly installed? Or does everything start curving back towards the founder when pressure goes up? See, once the founder becomes the center of gravity, when things get nutty, the business starts organizing around that, whether anyone intended it or not. People begin to wait for access. They leave room so the founder can jump in, and they stop acting like the decision maker, even in their own lane. And that's usually the moment real ownership starts collapsing. It doesn't happen in some obvious way, just gradually, one stressful moment at a time. The founder usually reads this wrong too. The founder thinks, I had to step in because they weren't ready. But that's not always what's happening. Sometimes the founder stepping in is exactly the reason the business never fully forms. Real ownership isn't built by saying, hey, this is yours now. It's built when the structure holds long enough for people to actually believe the role is theirs, when they've had enough reps carrying the weight through uncomfortable moments that the authority feels real to them, not just assigned. People have to believe the standard will still be there, even in, high stakes moments. They have to believe the role still holds when the decision carries real risk, and that the founder isn't going to take it back when the consequences start to sting. If they don't believe that, they won't act like owners. They'll act like people working under a ceiling they can't quite see. And that ceiling is you. So that's why so many businesses look like they're making progress, but then just slide back. The founder thinks the structure is working. Then after one hard week happens or one project gets tense, maybe one client issue turns serious or a KPI gets missed. And suddenly the founder is back in the middle of everything again. And from the founder's point of view, it feels like the system broke down. A lot of times it didn't break down, it just showed the truth of what it actually was. It showed that the business hadn't actually achieved or truly earned the stage it thought it was in. And that's where the real cost starts showing up. Stage isn't earned just because you say it is. It's earned when it holds up over time. Standard isn't real because it's written down somewhere. It's real when it survives hard moments. Ownership isn't real because it got assigned. It's real when the assigned person still owns it after that first struggle or tense moment hits. Once you see that, a lot of the language people use around this stuff starts to sound pretty hollow. People say things like they've empowered their team or they trust their leaders. They say they've pushed decisions down, and maybe they did. But what matters isn't what the structure looks like when nothing's being tested. It's what the structure does when something important is on the line. That's the only version that counts. That's where false progress gets exposed. False progress can look pretty convincing when things are calm and when roles look solid, when meetings feel organized and communication seems okay. And they can look pretty good when the founder is able to feel less involved for stretches at a time. But if the whole thing bends back towards the founder, the second pressure goes up, the business hasn't actually crossed the line it thinks it has. It's only borrowed the appearance of maturity during easy times. That's why the first tense moment matters so much, and why it's worth paying attention to what you actually do in it, not just what you intended to do. It tells you whether the business actually installed ownership or is acting more like a company-wide memo. It tells you whether authority was really handed over or only temporarily allowed, and whether the standards are real or just suggestions to be tossed out when things get difficult. It tells you whether the role structure actually holds up or whether you're still running a founder-centered business with systems jargon wrapped around it. And that gets expensive in ways that look like the proverbial hockey stick. It compounds slowly and then all at once. When a business keeps repeating this pattern, decisions start slowing down because people are waiting for the founder to weigh in, even when no one's asked. Standards get inconsistent over time because everybody's figured out that standards can bend when the moment's important enough. Escalation increases because the business has basically taught people that the real decision maker is still higher up than the structure says. And the founder gets worn down and burned out because attention keeps getting pulled back to the places the business said it had already moved past. Eventually, the company starts hitting a ceiling, and it's usually not what the founder thinks it is. It's not always because the market's bad, the offer's weak, or people are in the wrong seats. Sometimes the ceiling is structural. Sometimes it's the founder not being able to hold the standard in place when things get uncomfortable. If every real test pulls the business back onto the founder, you can't build real ownership on top of that. You can fake it, that only works for so long. That's why that first tense moment, that first moment of chaos matters so much. It's not just a hard day, it's a reveal. It shows whether the business actually trusts the stage it thinks it's in, whether the people in leadership roles actually have the authority they're supposed to have, and whether the founder has actually stopped being the person everything runs back through when it matters. This is where a lot of founders have to get a whole lot more honest with themselves. It's easy to say that the team owns it now. It's much harder to watch something get tense and keep your hands off it. It's easy to say that the standards matter, but it's much harder to stick to it when it feels like it's going to cost you. It's also easy to say people need to step up, yet it's harder to see that the way you've been running things might be the exact reason why they haven't. So next time chaos strikes, that's the question. Not whether the business sounds mature, whether the roles were clearly explained, or whether the right language got used in the right meeting. The real question is whether the stage holds. That's where the truth shows up. If decisions route back to the founder when the stakes go up, the business is still plagued by founder-centered gravity. If ownership falls apart the second things get uncomfortable, it was never really ownership. The standard only survives when conditions are easy. It's not a standard the business can actually build on. And if the stage doesn't hold when it gets tested, it hasn't been earned yet.